Hello everyone, my name is Evan Jones. I am making a video today that is very out of character for me, and I'm making this in response to some comments that I made on my social media page. They were very vague, they were very incoherent. It was about a local situation, and I couldn't be clear because at the time I had the facts, but I didn't have evidence to go with the facts, and I was waiting for other people to speak up on the matter, and they haven't. So now I'm speaking up on the matter. I want to say, again, my name is Evan Jones. I'm a transgender man. I am an advocate for survivors of sexual assault and domestic abuse. My official title is LGBTQ advocate, but I work with all survivors of sexual assault and domestic violence. I also co-host and am the lead research editor for a queer history podcast. We talk about queer history. We also talk about current and relevant events and topics such as sexual health, a variety of issues. But every single week, I am deep dived into queer topics, and I'm very well versed in it, and that is why I am addressing you today. I want to be very clear that I do not represent my organization or my podcast. The views expressed today are completely 100% my own. I have not been pushed or prodded or encouraged to do this by my organization or my podcast. They don't even know what I'm going to say. So again, these views are entirely my own and do not represent them in any way. So what am I talking about? I am talking about a local issue. There is a very prominent drag queen in our area who was accused of sexual impropriety with a teenager. They were accused of trying to form a relationship with a 15-year-old boy. The queen in question is 35. These allegations were levied by a local Rhode Island predator watch group, who had a website and has since gone underground, and I'll explain that further later on in the video. In order to provide clarity and anonymity in this video, I am going to refer to the Predator Watch as the Watch, or the Predator Watch probably. The Watch, I'm going to refer to the account that they used as the Minor, and I'm going to refer to the drag queen as the Queen. That is not a slur against the LGBTQ people. That is because this person is a drag queen, and it's a pretty gender neutral term that I can use and preserve their anonymity while also talking about the issue. About a month ago, The Watch released a video. It was just shy of 13 minutes long, and it alleged that this drag queen, as I said, tried to form a relationship with a teenage boy. They had released a series of videos trying to lure and catch other predators or supposed predators in their area. But this one was released and I watched it because I am familiar with this individual. Everything that I'm saying today is allegations that have been made. I am not accusing anyone. In the social media posts that I made before, I did come across as accusatory, and I do apologize for that. In being so vague and in my passionate quest for justice, I came across as accusing, which I'm not trying to do. But what I'm worried about is that the only person that is currently in control of the narrative is the person that is being accused of child molestation or pedophile activity. I don't want to say, again, I'm going to explain all of this further, but the person in question is the only person who currently has control of the narrative, because since the video was released a month ago, it has since been completely scrubbed free from the internet, and I will get to why later on. But the video was released, it has been scrubbed, so now there is no evidence and there's no one to stand up and counteract the way that the narrative is being spun. And I do believe that the narrative is being spun by the Queen to show them in their most positive light possible. And that is what I think the problem is. This is not to say that this is not to assume what the Queen's intentions were. This is not to say that the Queen is a predator or is or ever intended to engage in any kind of pedophile behavior. But this is to say that the Queen is spinning a narrative that is not true, is not accurate, and I would like to know why. And also, this is to give a more balanced perspective of the situation at hand, because the reality is that most people who are just now hearing of this instance are hearing of it from the Queen, and they only have the Queen's words to go on. This sounds a lot more regal than I intended with all the Queen language. So, I am going to provide what I know. And why am I in here? I am here because, like I said, a month ago, I was shown a video. I was shown a video that was just shy of 13 minutes long. At the beginning of the video, it was what looked like a promo clip of the drag queen. I think they were at a drag conference, and it was just something that they had put out that the Watch had taken and had put at the beginning of their video, and it was something very nefarious that was like, this queen is around your children. I'm not going to use the exact line that was used because it would immediately out the queen, because they are very well known for something that they do in the community. And so, but it played that clip, and then it followed with about 10 minutes at least of text messages. It started with the Grindr app, which is a gay hookup app. Started with messages on there. Started with the queen reaching out, establishing a conversation with this profile that said that they were 15. And then it went on, I mean, like I said, for 10 minutes worth, just the copious amounts of messages that I read and that several others read, it would have had to have been a relationship that spanned several days, if not weeks, but definitely several days, just because there were so many messages. At some point, the messages switched, the two exchanged phone numbers, and they switched over to text messaging. During this time, the Watch researched the person they were talking to. Now, it was implied that the Watch had targeted the queen, that they had looked them up because of their activism and targeted it. But it's very obvious from the video that the Watch did not know who they were talking to. They just knew it was a gay person in Rhode Island. And when they researched them, when you research this person, one of the first things that pops up about them is their drag persona. Like I said, they're a very prominent drag queen. They are a leader in the queer, or they have been a leader in the queer community out here in Rhode Island. And so throughout the video, as the text messages are going, the Watch then kind of plays through how they found out who this person is, and then they dox the person. And that means that they released the queen's information. They released their place of work. They released their phone number, their address. All very harmful tactics that can get a person hurt, especially when you don't have the full facts or when you don't have any appropriate way to follow up with action, which again I'll address in a minute. So they put the queen's information out there. They continue to play through the messages. Eventually, the queen and the underage person exchanged nude or nearly nude photos. I could not tell if the queen had exchanged a photo where they had covered up their privates or if the Predator Watch covered up the privates for the sake of the video, but they exchanged very sexual pictures with the minor, the account that was the minor. The video ends with the two deciding that they're going to meet up at Walmart at midnight. The queen texts, "I'm here, I'm wearing a green shirt and black pants." The minor texts back, "I'm inside, come meet me." I think they said, "I'm inside by the CDs." I remember CDs. I remember thinking, why would you go to Walmart and look at CDs? As the queen gets out of the car, at this point, it switches over to a little video. So we've been watching text messages. Now it switches over to video. The queen gets out of the car. They're wearing a green shirt and black pants. So if this was all made up, it would be hard to know why the queen, how the Predator or the Watch would know that the queen was wearing green shirt and black pants if they had just set this entire thing up. But the queen also admits in a later message that they went to Walmart to meet a person. So the Watch immediately shows up in their face with a camera, accuses them of being a predator and a pedophile. The queen does not answer them, simply turns around, runs back to their car, gets in it, and speeds away. There's no other interaction, and then the video ends again with a promo clip of the queen in their drag persona, and the video voice is kind of distorted because they kind of make it look like it's creepy, and that's that. This video was shared to the queen's friends, and if I am correct, I believe it was also shared to their place of work, to other places that they interact with. The last time I watched the video, there was less than 100 people, less than 100 views. So it was not very widely shared. People in the community saw this video and they kept it quiet. When I saw the video, I was very upset. I wanted to talk about it. I wanted to expose it and share it, but I was asked not to. Now, rightly, I was asked not to because we had not heard from the queen. It would have been harmful and wrong to share that video without giving the queen a chance to answer for themselves. People also asked me to wait because they wanted a chance to cut ties with the queen. The queen was connected to a lot of organizations and a lot of, especially queer groups and performers in the area, and they knew that if they went down, then the other groups and organizations would also go down. So people wanted a chance to sever ties, and friends wanted a chance to reach out to their friend, the queen, and ask them, "Hey, what's going on? What happened? Please explain this." And then there was nothing. There was nothing for a month. For a month, the queen didn't respond. For a month, the queen Like nothing happened. They withdrew from all their gigs, or they were booted off of all their gigs. They withdrew from public life. Everything went silent. And even though we didn't get the answers we wanted, I was fine with that. I was like, I was fine with that because that was about the most and the best that could happen. And the reason that was the best that could happen is, first of all, that video could not be used in any kind of legal way. There was nothing about it that you could actually use in a court of law. The authorities couldn't use it because regardless of what the assumed intentions were, if you want to assume the worst and assume that the queen did want to meet up with a 15-year-old boy, nothing illegal ever happened. There were no text messages actually exchanged between the queen and a 15-year-old boy. It was exchanged between the queen and a grown adult. There were no nude photos exchanged between the queen and a 15-year-old boy. The queen exchanged nude photos with a grown adult. And the photos that were sent back to the queen were not photos of a child. If it had been, it would have been on the watch. The watch would have been guilty of soliciting child pornography. Instead, it was a 22-year-old TikTok model who was used as bait. The TikTok model looks younger, could pass as a young teen, but there was no actual solicitation of child pornography. And then, of course, the queen never actually met with a minor. Not that it's illegal to meet with a minor in public, but the queen never met with a minor, never met with, the queen met with two old burly guys in a Walmart parking lot. Nothing about that is illegal. Regardless of what a person wants to infer the intentions are, it's not illegal. In fact, the Predator Watch actually really hurt themselves, and this is why they have gone more underground, because what they realized is that if they had turned that evidence over to the cops could have tried to subpoena a phone or a computer to see if there was more activity, if there may be legitimate conversations between the accused person and children. But instead, by putting it out there, by doxing the queen, by confronting them in the Walmart parking lot, the queen just had time to run away. If there was any damning evidence, they erased it. And that was it. Furthermore, now it just makes it look like the watch is being predatory themselves and attacking people. So none of it was handled right. And you see this a lot in these homemade Predator Watch groups. Because of that, the watch has withdrawn their videos, and they are being much more subtle in their attempts to take down. Now, I want to be clear, they are still attempting to take people down, and they are attempting to take people down on multiple platforms. They're attempting to take down both men, women, homosexual, heterosexual. This is being passed off as a homophobic attack, a right-wing group of homophobes trying to attack the queer community, and that's just not what's happening. The group of people that are made up, many of them may be right-wing, but they're a varied group of people. One of them is actually gay themselves, and I know that there's such thing as homosexuals with internalized homophobia that want to hurt their own community. But you just looking at the fact that they're on multiple platforms, you can't say that this is an attack against the queer community, which is how it's being spun by the queen in question. So, but all that to say, the entire video and the entire scenario was handled abhorrently by the watch, which they realized. And I mean, I guess, I don't know, better luck to them next time. In general, it's just not a very safe or healthy practice. If you're going to try to, get someone, turn it over to the proper authorities or turn it over to someone who understands the law better, because now you're just confronting pedophiles, you're doxing them, and you're not even... And we don't even know that this person is actually a pedophile. We don't even know that they're actually an abuser. We don't know the full facts. It's not a good way to handle it. So if you're like, well, hey, the video wasn't that, the video doesn't prove anything. Not really. It could have proved, the best it could prove is there was an intent to meet a minor. That's the best that it could prove. If everything was right, if it hadn't been cut and pasted, if nothing had been manipulated. But if you're like, hey, the video's no good and the queen disappeared, why does it matter? Well, the problem was the queen came back. They came back after a month of silence, and they released this statement on their social media, which I'm going to read as fast and as clearly as possible. This has been one of the hardest statuses I've ever had to write, but one I believe to be necessary because I value accountability and community safety. It's taken me some weeks to respond because these events have taken a toll on my mental health, and I needed the time and space to process. A video has surfaced online accusing me of inappropriate conduct, a charge I find demonstrably false, given that the person in question was entirely a work of fiction and derived under conditions that fit most people's definition of entrapment. Using Grindr, an adult hookup app, I was lured into a parking lot and chased down with a camera. At that moment, the screaming men that I presumed to be cisgender and heterosexual chasing me were so loud and threatening that I honestly did not know what their intentions were, so I ran. In the lead up to the attack, there was a Grindr conversation in which the person at the other end posed as a minor. I immediately made it clear that I didn't hook up with minors and encouraged them to seek age-appropriate platforms. The user continued to aggressively pursue me, and while making suggestive allusions that they were not who they appeared to be. It was obvious to me this person was an adult. They clearly hinted that they knew me from my career in activism, as well as alluded to the truth that they weren't a minor at all. At that point, the dynamics shifted, and that of a digital exchange between two consenting adults, and the conversation clearly shows this, which is why they did that cut and paste hit job and won't release the full exchange. At no point did I ever believe I was going to meet up with someone underage, and now it has come to light the same group of homophobes have entrapped other members of our community in similar fashion. I encourage you not to jump to conclusions if and when the next doxing and phone disclosure takes place. If it doesn't seem congruent, then it probably isn't. To be clear, there's a group of right-wing homophobes actively catfishing queer public figures through Grindr, using nefarious tactics to entrap and disgrace members of the PVD, that's Providence, drag, and LGBTQ communities. I am, however, not entirely blameless in this situation. I regret the danger I put myself in when I agreed to meet knowing they were catfishing me. I regret the possible breach of integrity of the queer movement given my very prominent role I've had in the past fighting for liberation. It is my hope that you can all forgive me for that. In the meantime, it is with deep regret that I announce my indefinite hiatus from drag and a short break from the community and activist spaces while I work through the trauma of this attack. So much of my private information was made public, and I was so clearly dangled out there as a target for further and perhaps much more vicious forms of homophobic violence that I look over my shoulder any time I walk out of the house or step out of my car. This has been a profoundly damaging effect on my mental health. I just don't feel safe anywhere right now. I will not address questions in the comments here, but I invite you to contact me directly with any questions you might have. And most importantly, I'm asking for your understanding and solidarity. I will end by saying that the greatest anguish I've had through this whole incident has been the separation from a community that means so much to me. In Providence, we have something special, and I hope to rejoin you in some capacity soon. When I read that, I was upset. And I was upset because they talked about accountability when they didn't really take any accountability. I was upset because I had read the messages, and although they continually say, I knew that I was meeting an adult, I knew that I wasn't talking to a minor, the entire exchange, days and days worth of exchange, is a very clear communication with the minor. The one thing that the watch did do is that they made repeated attempts to make it clear that they were underage, and this was completely ignored or enjoyed or utilized by the queen in question. I'll get to that in a second. So, the only thing that they actually apologized was the fact that they met up with someone that they knew was catfishing them, which is a very odd thing to apologize for. They also apologized for the implications this could have on the queer community, which was a very brief, brushed over sentence. And all things considered, that's the understatement of the year, the implications. If you're part of the queer community, and if you know our history, you know how the words pedophile and child molester have been used so egregiously against us for centuries. We have been denied teaching positions. We've been denied working with organizations that work with children. We've been denied things like the Boy Scouts, and even volunteer positions that work with children. LGBTQ people have been denied those positions specifically because we are gay. If a straight person is accused of sexual assault, or if they are accused of child molestation, it's just because they're a child molester or because they're an abuser. But if an LGBTQ person is accused of sexual assault or molestation, it is almost always spun that they are that way because they are gay. Our identity is tied to the assault, and the entire community, therefore, is tied to that assault, as if we are all child molesters. As a personal testimony, my own parents have looked at me before and told me that I was going to abuse children because of my queer identity. So yes, that very much hits home to me, and I understand the implications if a drag queen that has worked directly with children is then exposed as someone who may have a problem with children. And again, that's all the allegation, regardless of whether the allegations are true or false, regardless of whether they're somewhat true and somewhat false. Just the fact that it's out there is enough to harm the queer community. First of all, the queen maintains that the dynamic shifted, that they knew that they were talking to an adult the entire time. But right here in this message, we see that they didn't know that they were talking to an adult. or at least we see them talk about the law and about how, man, those damn underage laws or those damn statutory rape laws are really hard. The Queen insists that they were the one who was aggressively pursued. Yet the first several comments are the Queen pursuing and continuing the conversation. The Queen claims that it's obvious the entire time that the person was an adult, or at least that it became very obvious that they were talking to an adult. But of all the messages that I watched in the video, that others watched, and the screenshots that I've obtained, it shows again and again that this was at least played out as a minor. The minor consistently stays to their role. They talk about school. They talk about meeting with their friend Stacy. They talk about their dad. So again and again, it talks about, like, it's put in this dynamic of an adult and a child. The Queen claims that this is a renegade group of homophobes. So I had a very roundabout source get to me with conversations, and the source, when asked, and said, this is being passed off as you guys are a group of homophobes, they told us, of course, that they were on several platforms. They were on Bumble. They were trying to catfish or catch a predatory woman. Like I said, they had reached out to several people. They had caught a couple of gay men on Grindr, but they talked about how they were on multiple platforms and that this wasn't about homophobia. And this was one exchange that was had. So I'm not saying that there's no homophobia in that group. I don't know. But what I'm saying is to say that this is just a right-wing group of nut jobs that's specifically trying to attack the queer community is not honest and is not true. And I would like to know why that was lied about. I'd like to know why the Queen lied and said that they were aggressively pursued when it doesn't seem that they were. And if messages were erased, why didn't they say what those messages said? The Queen claims that they have erased all of their messages on their end. And like anything that could have redeemed them, knowing that they were attacked, that you've been confronted by a group of Predator Watch in the Walmart parking lot, and your first thing is to erase all the messages and not save any of them that would prove that you were set up. Could be. But that's a question that I think needs to be asked. Another thing is that it was very out of character for the Queen. This is a person who's known for being aggressive. This is a person who's known to stand on the front of picket lines, to pick fights with Nazis. And whenever they were confronted, when they said they knew they were going to meet a catfish, they knew they were going to meet someone who's catfish. So they go there expecting to meet someone who is not who they say they are. And then when they're confronted by that person, their first and only idea is to run. But you went there saying that you knew that you were going to meet someone who was a catfish. Now, again, you're in a parking lot in Walmart at midnight. 2 men approach you. They flash a camera in your face. I don't know what my reaction would be. I agree. I just want to know, if you go there knowing that you're going to meet someone who's not who they say they are, why are you surprised when someone who's not who they say they are confronts you? Most importantly, why did it take a month to do that? That's the biggest question. Why did it take a month? Once all the information had been erased, once there was no longer in there any contradictory evidence that you believed was still out there, that the Queen believed was still out there, once all of that has been removed, that's when the statement is made. And now the narrative can be spun however they want, because they are in complete control of the evidence. And according to everybody else, if you read that statement and had no clue of the previous facts, you'd think, of course, absolutely, this person has been targeted. They are an activist. They are known for their very, very social and radical views. And obviously they were attacked by a group of right-wing homophobes, and they were set up in a frame-up, and that's that. And if you have no idea that there was a whole previous exchange before this, it would make sense. And that's why it matters that the person who's being accused is not the only person who's in charge of the narrative. One response that was given by the Queen to a person was that they were engaging in age play. So age play, you kind of think like the teacher and the student. A lot of people go a lot longer, a lot more extreme with that. Age role play. And that's a possibility. Again, wonder why no messages confirming that were saved, why the whole thing was deleted. Number two, as a person myself who has spent a lot of time in the fetish and kink community, researching in the fetish and kink community, being in the fetish and kink community informally, I've just never seen an age play so well acted out. And I'm not saying that that's not what could have happened, especially if rules and scenarios were set up ahead of time. But again, why wasn't any of that evidence produced, and why did it take a month for that reason to be produced? Because I'm all for sexual positivity. I really am. And what a person does in their bedroom, and if you start monitoring people's role plays, you're going to be in trouble. But that was an easy explanation early on, and it wasn't given. It wasn't given again until any contradictory evidence was erased. So people ask me, what do I want? What is my goal for all this? And I'm so sorry this has gone so long. Number one, I want the queer community to have all the facts. I want a balanced perspective. If you're going to make a judgment on this, I want you to know the facts. And I want you to know the facts because, number two, this person is trying to make a comeback. And I think that matters. I'm not opposed to them making a comeback. I'm opposed to them making a comeback when they're the only person on their terms and they're the only person who has the information. I'm opposed to making the comeback if we haven't had adequate answers to the questions, when people can't even ask the proper questions because they don't have all the information. I'm opposed to them making a comeback, especially working with children, given all of this. Because in the best case scenario, they knew that they were engaging in a very extreme role play, and parents are going to have questions. And again, what a person does in their personal life and in their personal bedroom, I don't think you should monitor that, but I also understand parents having questions. That's the best case scenario. That's if everything that the queen is saying is true. And if anything that the queen is saying isn't true, that's cause for concern and cause for pause. This is not about ruining someone's life. This is not dictating what people can and can't do in their bedroom. This is not about trying to harm the queer community. Absolutely not. But it is about saying, what about the victims? What happens when an allegation is brought forward and it's completely swept under the rug? It's completely ignored. Nobody wants to talk about this. Nobody wants to question the queen. People who saw the video will not call the queen out. They will not ask hard questions. They won't talk about it. They're just letting the queen run the entire narrative. That's wrong. Not because it's wrong because I'm saying what the queen did was wrong. It's wrong to let a person who's accused run the narrative. That's so harmful. That's so dangerous. And what message does that send to victims? If your if you come forward, your accuser is the one who's going to run the narrative. It doesn't matter if we have to have real accountability, and real accountability is having all the facts presented and then letting people make a judgment. Not one person who's accused spinning the narrative how they want and making it look like they're the victim and they're the one who's traumatized and they're the one who was, completely used. And even, I mean, it's as harmful as it is, obviously, for the watch to spread allegations against, if they did make up these lies and completely frame the queen, of course, they should be held legally accountable. As harmful as that is, it's equally harmful to categorize a group of people that are trying to protect their children as a bunch of homophobes who made this entire thing up just so that they could attack an LGBTQ activist. There's no evidence for that. That's completely false. That's completely conjecture. So where's the balanced evidence? So I want the queer community to actually hold a person accountable in whatever that comes out. I'm not trying to give a judgment on how it should come out. I just want the facts to be presented. I want to know that the youth are safe. I want victims to know that they are heard, and that if claims are made, the queer community will take the proper action, and we won't sweep things under the rug. My feed has been filled with things about how Joe Biden was just called out for his sexual assault, and we have to hold him accountable. And yet when one of our own is accused of something, we just let it go. We don't address it. We address it in private messages in the background so we don't have to confront the truth. What does that say about us? I think there's a way to do this and to handle it appropriately and to handle it in a balanced manner. So that's what I want. You're welcome to message me if you have any more questions. I'm sorry this took so long, but it was a lot of information to put out there. And thank you.